Hello, welcome to this presentation on organizing creativity, a few tips to realize creative projects. We look at creativity and organization, and then we go through a couple of steps which are really useful to get creative projects off the ground. First one is master the topic. Then we look at generate ideas, capture ideas, collect ideas, realize projects, and archive projects. And the nice thing is that each of these steps play back to master the topic. So when you occupy yourself with a creative project, generate ideas, capture ideas, collect them, realize the projects, etc., you also get better in your topic. But first, let's look at creativity and organization. What is creativity? Creativity has been defined as the deliberate creation of something that is both you and useful. So first off, it's deliberate. So serendipity has its place, but you have to use your mind. There has to be an idea behind it. It can't be just an ape typing something and accidentally hitting a few lines of Shakespeare. It has to be really deliberate. Then there's the creation aspect. It has to be realized. It can't simply remain an idea, but it has to be something that can be used, seen, that is actually there. Then it has to be new, so you have to know what is known and go beyond it. Don't invent the wheel again, but really make something new. And it has to be useful. It can't be simply insanity, doing something that is different but not useful. And it has to be understood and connect to something that already exists so people can actually understand it and use it. So let's look at creativity again. And this time, what really makes creativity? Well, there's three aspects according to Csikszentmihalyi, and that's the individual, that's the domain, and that's the field. The individual is pretty simple, that's you. The domain is the area in which you are creative, for example, physics, music, or something else. And the fields, these are actually the people who evaluate whether something is creative. For example, your colleagues, your readers, if you write something, or your partner if you're doing something for this person. And this strongly influences whether something is seen as creative. For example, if you're working in science, you have peer review. If you write a paper, other colleagues look at it and decide whether it's creative, new and useful, it's really methodological sound. Does it really contribute something new? Or on the top right, if you have a goodbye present for a colleague, then it's the colleague who decides whether it's creative. Or the bottom left, if you do something for your partner, then it's this partner who decides. Or on the bottom right, if you do something for yourself, then it's you who decides whether something is creative. One of the nice things today is that it's pretty easy to get your work out there. For example, you can always create simply a blog and show your work there. Or you, for example, if you write something, you can publish it with self-publishing services. Or if you're more on the visual arts side, you can, for example, use DeviantArt to show your work. Or if you, for example, make some nice designs which would really look well on t-shirts or other clothing, you can use, for example, Sezzle or some other service to get your work out there. And you can also be directly supported by people, for example, with Patreon, Kickstarter, Flattr, or Amazon affiliate links, and lots of more. So today it's pretty easy to get your work out there, to essentially get paid for your work, which is nice feedback. Because if people are willing to pay for your work, well, then it can't be that bad. Unless they're forced to, of course. One disadvantage is this big fish, little pond phenomenon, where you look around and you think, yeah, your work is really good, and then you see what other people do online, and you find out, yeah, perhaps my work is not that good in comparison. So this is a caveat here. Remember, especially if you're starting in something, your work will not be as good as the work of someone who does work in this area for ages. So that's simply normal. And also remember, if you see something online, what you see is really the best of the best what this person has accomplished. Nobody puts, or almost nobody puts crappy work online, so you don't see all the failed attempts. So as a downside, if you're looking online, you find a lot of good work, which can be inspiring, but which can also scare you a little, like, okay, I'm never going to be that good. Yeah, acknowledge that you have some work to do, but you can improve. And one day people will think this about you. Now, how can you be creative? And there's some stereotypical approaches, let's say. For example, imagine you want to write a book. And now let's look at this person trying to write a book. Okay, this didn't work out that well for her, and it's no surprise. In most cases, you can't simply open a word processor and try starting a novel. It doesn't work this way. Unfortunately, some people think creativity looks something like this. You are inspired, you occupy yourself with a topic, for example, you open the word processor and start writing, and then you have a creative work. This usually never works. Instead, forget inspiration. Because if you really depend on inspiration, if you really can only work if you're inspired, essentially all your creative work hinges on this inspiration. If it's not there, you won't produce anything. And that's a really insecure way to live and a really stressful way to live. A much better approach is to occupy yourself with a topic, which leads to you being inspired, which then leads to creative work. This sounds a little bit strange. I mean, how can you do anything creative if you're not inspired? But this will happen almost automatically when you occupy yourself with a topic, when you really work with it and simply sit down, start working, whether you're inspired or not. And there's really good research supporting this. For example, people were asked to write only when they were inspired, versus people who were asked to write a certain amount of words per day. And then a while later, they looked at, okay, how much did these two groups write? And the people who had to write a certain number of words per day, not only did it write much more, but also had much more ideas. So it's not simply that they only wrote garbage, but they had to write something, they had to sit down, they had to work with the topic, and this led them to have a lot of ideas. So the inspiration came by working with the topic. Or beautiful put here, serious writer write, inspired or not, over time they discover that routine is a better friend to them than inspiration. So forget being inspired first, just occupy yourself with the topic, and then inspiration will come and the creative work will result usually. You also see this occupation with the topic, inspiration, creative work, when you look at typical models of creativity. For example, one that was used by Csikszentmihalyi, which also starts with occupation with the topic. Then you have the incubation phase, where you do something else. For example, you go for a walk or take a shower. Then you have an insight or higher experience, which is usually when old Greeks jump out of the bathtub, run across the street and shout Eureka. Then you have to evaluate this idea. So, is it really good? Do you need to change something? And then you have to elaborate it, usually to make it better. For example, the first idea is already quite good, but there are a couple of quirks, and you have to work them out. And then you occupy yourself again with the topic, have another incubation phases, insight, aha experience, etc. So the inspiration is here in the Inside Aha experience, and the result is this creative work. An important aspect here is that it's a circular model. So after elaboration, you start again with occupying yourself with a topic, which means creative process is not only simple one single idea, which is really crucial here. You run through this model again and again and again and again. And you can see this quite easily. For example, imagine you have an idea for a book, but it won't simply end with this one idea for a book. For example, the idea about the story about a boy who goes to school and becomes a magician or a wizard, which was, for example, in Harry Potter or in Books of Magic. It's nice to have this idea, but this doesn't give you enough. You need characters, you need settings, you need lots and lots of other things. But if you look at this model, you start with this idea, and you want to have this creative work, and then you occupy yourself with the topic. You get lots and lots of ideas, which you need. And this is also the main reason why organization is important in creativity, because you have to handle these ideas. If it was only one idea, you want to write a story about a boy who goes to school and becomes a wizard, that would be pretty easy. You could remember it easily. But look at all these ideas, settings, characters, description, details. It's way too much to have it all in your mind, because it won't be available when you need it, not as easily. So you have to organize this creativity. So forget simply having only one idea. Think about you having it to deal with lots of ideas, and you have to organize them. And you see this, for example, if you look at what writers do. Here, for example, Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. J.K. Rowling did this table here and wrote down when something happens and really plans a novel. She didn't simply sit down in front of a computer and write it down, but she actually did some planning. And this is even the case for, let's say, more creative pursuits. You would think that poets are simply inspired. No, they also do something similar. They write down feelings, events, impressions, and then use this material, and they occupy themselves with it, and this leads them to have ideas. Or even painters. They simply collect images, some of them, and look at them and turn to them for inspiration. Again, they occupy themselves with the topic and then they get inspired. They don't wait around for inspiration to strike them, but it's an active process. You also see it, for example, with scientists or with other artists. For example, Leonardo da Vinci, one of the reasons why we know so much about him is because he did a lot of sketches. Or Edison, whose main invention was the Industrial Research Lab, where he did, where he was creative with a really scientific approach or engineering approach, really doing experiments, trying to find out what works, what doesn't work. Or on the bottom left, Helmut Newton, a photographer who did a lot of notes. Or on the bottom right, Otto Hahn. This was, for example, his work desk, also doing a lot of notes. And especially for scientists, notes are crucial because you have to always make sure that when you cite something, that you actually provide the source. And if you don't do it, we have wikis like Vroniplug, which find out whether scientists have done some plagiarism. So it's a really important aspect to be really, like E.O. Wilson wrote here, think like a poet but work like a bookkeeper. Really work with these ideas, be really diligent here, jot them down, sort them, and deal with them. So that was a little introduction here, creativity and organization. If you want to be creative, you need this organization, you need to work with these ideas, you have to organize them. And now let's look at ways to do this. First of all, let's start with master the topic. If we look at this model here, it starts with occupation with the topic. And sure, it would be nice if we could just do something without investing a lot of effort first, but this won't work. And it won't work no matter the area. For example, if you look at a beautiful video here, sources at the end of the presentation, just look at the beauty of this animation here. It looks effortless, it looks beautiful, but it takes a lot of work to do something like this. There's a beautiful making of video, and this person took, I think, 1 or 2 years to do this animation, which is longer than what I've shown here, just only that you get the idea. And this is a common theme here, nicely put by Michelangelo. If people only knew how hard I worked to gain my mastery, it wouldn't seem so wonderful at all. You need to invest a lot of work to really become creative, to really do great creative works. The problem is everybody wants to be successful, but few are willing to pay the price. And it's no matter which area it is, whether it's dance or whether it's writing or music or anything else, you need to invest a lot of effort. So how much effort do you need to invest? There are some studies about what makes someone an expert, how much time did experts usually invest in an area to become an expert, and the rough number is 10,000 hours. You need to invest 10,000 hours to become an expert in something. So what do 10,000 hours look like? Well, that depends on how many hours you invest per day. If you invest 1 hour a day, you are an expert in 27 years. If you invest 7 hours a day, so a whole work day, each and every day, including Saturdays and Sundays, you're there in 3.91 years, so 4 years roughly, which is about the time someone needs to finish a dissertation. And if you would work for 14 hours a day, each and every day, no day off, you would be there in 2 years. And this shows a little bit the limits, because you can't be good in everything. You have to focus on something, and you have to really invest the time. And if you really take it seriously and invest a lot of time in it, it still would take you about 4 years if you invest 7 hours a day, which is hard to do if you have a job and a social life. If you can't invest that much, it will take longer. But on the positive side, if you invest the time, you will get there if you do it the right way. Also, for example, do deliberate learning, not only occupying yourself blindly, but using an approach where you actually get feedback, work on problems you can solve, which are difficult but manageable, and work your way up. So how can you master the topic? First, take creativity seriously. It's not something you can do en passant. You really have to invest the time. Then deliberately choose your environment and your teachers. Get the best environment and the best teachers you can. Don't waste your time. Then avoid internal and external distractions. For example, go offline, or if you write something, go to a university library, somewhere where you can really focus on your work. Then eliminate topic competition. So if there are other things you might want to do, really focus on something and ignore the rest. Then define and measure success criteria so that you get feedback whether you're on the right track. You have to say no, create limits and defend your time. You will never have enough time, you have to defend this time. You can divide projects into small tasks and then switch between these small tasks and the overall project so that you see the big picture, but always know what you have to do. And select challenging but doable projects, something that is difficult but manageable. And the nice thing about the internet again is that there are lots of information online which can help you. For example, Instructables, Reddit, Stack Exchange, or YouTube videos which really give you a lot of information how to do something, and you can use it to become better. Now, if you're working on mastering the topic, the next step here is generating ideas. And that's the nice thing here. If you occupy yourself with the topic, the ideas will usually come. There are lots of creativity techniques, and there are lists and lists and lists of them. I've got a list here on the right side from a book source at the end of the presentation. And there are lots of things you can do. But I think most of these creativity techniques are just good excuses, because you can, for example, sit and think. And if somebody asks you what you're doing, you can say, oh, I'm applying a creativity technique. I'm not simply sitting around here, but I'm doing something. And again, the occupation with the topic is the key. As someone once said, you can't force creativity. You have to work on a topic and then give yourself the time and space to come up with ideas. And again, there are lots and lots of techniques which you can use. But again, you need to occupy yourself with the topic first, because let's, for example, look at brainstorming. You can't storm an empty attic. So it's nice if you want to brainstorm, but you don't have any information about the topic. You don't have any expertise. It's really difficult to come up with good ideas. One thing that I really recommend is making time for ideas. This goes back to the incubation phase where you do something else, and it's really important to have this time, to have some time where you're not actively occupied with something that takes your whole attention. For example, go offline or go for a walk. Bathing, showering is really nice because you sit and relax, and it's a great time to get ideas. Or in bed before falling asleep after waking up, and here lots of ideas come. Unfortunately, most of the time you're really tired, and it's really thoughtful to write them down, but do it. Don't think you'll remember them the next morning. Most of the time you won't, and you won't even remember that you had ideas. Or when you do meditation or yoga, or during a midday nap, or when you follow daydreams, or you use presentation and meetings. I mean, lots of meetings are not that important, and you can think about something else. Or classical concerts where you sit and listen to music, really great time for ideas. Or when you travel alone, you're sitting in a plane and some ideas come, write them down. Or for example, doing solo endurance sport. If you're running and your mind is occupied with something else and you're going through the motion and then some ideas come, write them down. I already said it's really important to write the ideas down, and there we come to capturing ideas. Because if there's one general rule when it comes to ideas is to capture them immediately. And I stress here the immediately. Don't think that you'll remember it later. For example, you walk home and you see your front door and you have an idea, and then you think, I could write it down now, but I simply open the door, put away my stuff, and then I write this idea down. I can do it at my computer. It's much easier to do it then. Don't. Because many times you open the door, something else happened, you find a letter or someone else is at home and starts a conversation and you forget this idea. And ideas usually don't come back. So if there's anything you take from this presentation, write down your ideas. Just try it out for a week or a month and then compare the amount of ideas you had compared to the time prior to writing them down. And the nice thing is there are countless methods, pen and paper, you can use the cell phone, you can use a blackboard, whiteboard or magic charts, pinboard. You can do it on the PC, for example, if you simply put a text file where you can open it quickly because a text file is open in the blink of an eye, and you can write down lots and lots of ways to capture ideas. Essentially, you always have something to write on, and if you have a pen that writes on almost anything, it's really easy to jot down ideas. Now, capturing ideas is only the first step, because it really doesn't help you if you have lots of pieces of paper with ideas, usually in bad handwriting. So you have to collect these ideas. And here the idea is to have a system that is useful for you, a system which you trust, that no ideas get lost, that you find them again, and that you have the ideas available when you need them. You don't have to think, oh, I could remember it later, but you simply look at it and find it quickly. And you have space to develop ideas. And again, there are countless methods. Some people use index cards or mind maps or outliners, or there's specific management software, digital notebooks, wikis, lots and lots of different ways. What I would really recommend is to have some kind of idea inbox where you first put all your ideas in. So for example, you write ideas on a piece of paper, you have some ideas on your smartphone, you have some ideas on a file on your computer, to have one place where all these ideas merge, where they're collected first. And for me, it's a simple text file. If I write down something on a piece of paper, I type it again in the text file. And from this text file, it gets sorted to the place where we'll find it later. Personally, I use DevonSync, which is a nice software, unfortunately only for Mac. And there you can simply have text files in different databases and write down ideas, and later use the search function, use for file names or file content, and find it quickly. There are other ways. Unfortunately, this software doesn't exist anymore, but there are similar ones. These are digital notebooks. They look like a notebook. They're more or less can interact with them like a notebook, and you can do some kind of topic pages where you collect a lot of information about a single topic. When I was using it, like I said, unfortunately it's not available anymore. I had a couple of these notebooks, and they collected all the ideas, for example, for photography or for writing fiction, or for example for work. And there I had a lot of information available, similar like a normal notebook, and it made it really easy to get to the information. Like I said, unfortunately not available anymore. And in the meantime, I come to realize that something like DevonSync, what I've shown you before, is perhaps a little easier, because here you have a pretty clear structure, and while it makes it easy to find information, it makes it a little bit harder to put information inside. So yeah, it's a way to do something similar, for example, like Microsoft OneNote or something like this, but it's not the only way to organize ideas. A colleague of mine did it with Magic Shards. These are sheets of paper which stick to walls, and you don't need pins or Scotch tape. You simply put them on the wall and they stay there. And then you essentially have a huge whiteboard. Really useful to get an overview about an issue, for example, her dissertation thesis here. Again, there are lots of ways, and there's a source where you find other methods to collect ideas later. Now let's come to realizing projects. One of the most frequent problems I encounter here is that people have too many ideas and they don't know which projects to start. Because projects take time, you really need to invest a lot of effort. And when you're doing this one project, you don't do any other projects. So there are huge opportunity costs if you decide to do one project, and perhaps another project would be better. There's also the frequent, the grass is greener on the other side issue, when people think, yeah, perhaps I should have started this other project. They stop doing the projects they're working on and switch to another one. And then a short while later, they run on the ground there too and switch to the next one and never finish anything. Personally, I think this view is really helpful. You have one core project, one project which you are actively realizing. Then you have central projects, and these projects are in your mind, and you collect ideas for them. And you try to work them out so that you could realize them once you have enough information, but you're not actually realizing them. You're only realizing the core project. And you don't have more than, let's say, 6 or 7 central projects. And then there are peripheral projects, which are all other ideas which you collect, but you don't really have them in focus. You don't actively search for new information. These are just things you write down. It's some kind of someday folder. If you have the time, you work on them, but it's not in focus. And if you have this kind of attitude, you can work on the core project and finish it, while the central projects get better. And once you finish with the core project, you can look at your central projects and make one of them the next core project. And then if you have the time, look at the peripheral projects and make one of them your next central project. So this is one way to deal with too many ideas. Focus on one to realize it and don't stop unless it's really not possible to realize it. Maybe the case. But usually any project will suck some time and you then simply have to go through. Because this is also an important issue here, you will encounter setbacks when you realize projects. Because no matter how good the idea is, when you realize something, you notice a slight gulf between the idea and the reality. And it's okay to make mistakes, especially in science. Beautiful quotation here by Einstein, if he really did say it. But there's also it's also shared by other scientists. For example, here's a beautiful one-page essay about the importance of stupidity in scientific research. Because you're the first person who tries something out. You're creative. Nobody has done it before. So you're the first one to find out what works, what doesn't work, and where the hidden sinkholes are. And you're the first one to walk into them. And so embrace being feeling stupid. You're not stupid. You're simply the first one who tries it out. And afterwards, it's easy. If you show something, the working solutions will say, yeah, I could have done it myself. But they don't see just how many setbacks there were in making it actually work. It's just part of the process. And if this happens, you need persistence. Again, beautiful quotation by Calvin Coolidge. Nothing in this world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not. Nothing is more common than unsuccessful people with talent. Genius will not. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Education will not. The work is full of educated derelicts. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent. The slogan "Press on" has solved and always will solve the problems of the human race. So don't be scared if some projects turn out more difficult than others. When you encounter pushback, this is simply part of the game. Another tip I have when you realize something, look for good tools, but don't spend too much time on them. Because you can easily spend so much time looking for tools that you don't do anything. But for me, especially when it came to writing, I really like the idea of using an outliner on the left side here. And this has a content outline, which contains all the information I needed for writing, including the sources, so that I had a really well-structured bones of the text with all the information I needed. And on the right side, I have Scrivener, a writing software, and then I simply wrote it down. So I first put this all in the right order on the left side, and then I used it and simply wrote it down. It was really helpful to do it this way for my dissertation thesis. After I had the outline, which took a few years, it was pretty easy to write the dissertation thesis. I wrote, I think, a little bit over 200 pages in a month. And these were pages which are mostly, after some revising, were used for the thesis. If you do writing, I really recommend looking at Scrivener. It's a really nice software. It can look like this, where you have all information visible, but you can also, for example, reduce the amount of information you see to really focus on the writing. And one of the best things about Scrivener is the backup function. So it's very easy to do backups of your work, because in creative work, you usually don't get it back if you lose the data. And it has a snapshot function where you can simply make a copy of the text, and Scrivener handles all the information. And then you compare different versions and see what's changed. And similar, if you know Wikipedia, it's a little bit like version control, but much better integrated. So it's very easy to work with and see when something is changed. And again, you have, for example, a modus where you can really focus on the writing. Really great software. Did some beautiful works with it, I think. And it's also available for Windows, not only for Mac. And when it comes to writing, another issue is take into account that you will rework what you wrote. This is one of the reasons why I really like the snapshot function of Scrivener. You can simply make a snapshot and always go back to the earlier versions. And no matter what you read, almost any cases, the work was revised. Here, for example, A Paper Without by Carl Sagan. This wasn't the first draft which he used in his presentation. He did work on it, and that's normal, especially when you do writing. And the same is true with, for example, paintings, when you make sketches or any other thing. Okay, last step here is archiving projects. And I also include here backups, and including backups while you're being creative. And I can't stress it enough, especially if you work with digital technology, because yeah, it's really comfortable to work this way, but what about the long-term use? When you do backups, I mean, look at these media, these are floppy disks or a CD, they're faded out, and if you have your backups on these media, it's really hard to get them back. So convert them before it's too late. And when it comes to backups, do them early, often, incremental. So, for example, if you're working on a draft, for example, my book, then give this draft a date, so the current date, and an incremental number. And then when you save it again, raise the number so that you have multiple files. If you only have one file and simply back up this file again and again, then you only have one backup. And especially if you use Word or something like that, it's really easy to get a broken Word file which you can't open anymore. Then use external sources. On the right side, you see one of my older notebooks, and one day I started it and I got this view. So the hard disk drive was gone. All data was lost, but it wasn't a problem because I had an external hard disk drive where all my information was also on it. So I didn't lose much data, I think 1 to 3 files or so, which I changed the evening before and didn't had a backup. But you really need external backups. If you lose your notebook, or if it's get broken, you spill a glass of wine on it, the data is gone. And keep your old backups. So it's no problem today to simply transfer a few terabyte of data and get a new hard disk drive. Keep the old backups. You never know when you might need them. So these are backups. What about the works you did? What you do with them? One thing I really like is to have them available. For example, I did a presentation about scientific work, and I did you export the slides as images, made a poster of these images, and did put it on a wall. So I had a reminder of the presentation, in which I did invest a lot of time and effort, and which was well received. Or if you are into photography, you can simply put them on the wall, provide some information about the photo shooting, or if you do books or something like this, keep a version for yourself. And I would keep both the really encouraging feedback you get for your work and even the attempts which weren't that successful. For example, doing some nail art on the fingers of a former partner, which were not that well. And if you really profit by something, for example, I really like Scrivener, and after I did write a book, I did send the programmer this book with some text saying thank you, because without the software I wouldn't have been able to write this book. So if you can, give something back. So this was a short overview: creativity, organization, master the topic, generate ideas, capture ideas, collect ideas, realize projects, archive projects. And most of the information here comes from a Just for Fun book, one of the books I did with Scrivener, called Organizing Creativity, which is available for free on my website. It also covers the same topics and a few other things in much more detail, and hopefully in better English than my presentation style at the moment. And you find it if you go on the website. There's a link and you can download this as PDF. So this was the presentation. Here are the sources I've used. And now I can only say thank you very much for listening and have fun creating something that is new and useful.